Hi again then guys, and welcome to another Special Projects custom build. And in this particular custom build, it's more of a what if tune, as we sometimes do. What if this vehicle existed, even though in real life it technically doesn't. And on this occasion, this what if build is for the Volkswagen Bora, also called the Jetta, of course, in the States in particular. And this tune is a what if build for a Bora R32. Of course, this car shares the same generation as the Mark IV Golf R32. That's my personal favourite generation of R32. And what I've done is I've taken the power, the torque, the gear ratios and the appearance of the Golf R32 and then transferred those over as accurately and as closely as we can to the Bora. Now, on the playback, the blue here looks slightly different to how it actually does in the game. The blue actually comes from the Golf. It's deep blue pearl effect. It's slightly darker in the game than here on the playback. I've got my settings with the contrast a little bit higher. As far as the rims, I've gone for inch up 1 on the size, and I've gone for Rays 57XVs, which I've painted a slightly brighter silver. And of course there are plenty of silvers and greys that you can use for that. So that's it for the visuals. There's not really much else that you'd need to do. So we'll go over to the mechanical garage next, and then of course take it out on a circuit to see how it compares to the Golf. Now there are some things of course that you can't replicate because of certain tuning limitations. For instance, the engine capacity on the Golf is a 3.2, as the name suggests. On this car it's a 2.8. You can't change that. The stuff which we can change though, we have. Now as you can see, I've swapped it up to sport soft tyres. You could consider that to be overkill, so it's down to personal preference. As far as suspension, I've altered the ride height because this car has what I refer to as a snowplow stance, where the front end is very low in comparison to the back. Personally, I hate that look on production cars. Some people may like it though, so it's down to personal preference. Of course, the Golf has even suspension and it's pretty low to the ground, so that's basically what I've gone for with this one. Lower it overall, but also make it a little bit more even. It's still a little bit lower at the front if you look at the car driving, but overall I'm happy with it personally. Of course you could change that up if you want to though. As far as springs, we've rounded those up to 450 and 325. The dampers and anti-roll are higher than stock, but lower than the default racing settings of 3. So I've lowered those down to 2, because you want it to feel better, but you don't want it to feel amazing. It's still a production car at the end of the day. For camber and tow, we've got neutral values on those. You could give it some, of course, if you want to, but I haven't opted to. As far as the drivetrain and initially the diff, we've gone for the lowest initial torque and the highest settings all around for both acceleration and braking, as you can see. But as always, if you already know settings that work better for you, by all means go for those. And likewise with the center diff, you could change it up if you wanted to, go 50-50, 30-70, even 10-90, whatever suits you personally. As far as power, we're running both the power and torque of the real Golf, or as close to it as we can get. 237 horsepower in-game, 32.6 I think was the torque figure. We're running 32.7 when you take it into the garage, rounds it up to 33 as you can see there. So as far as those upgrades, and of course there are different ways of getting that amount of power and torque, but I've gone for an oil change, then sports computer, sports cat and intake tuning, then reduced it down to 93.3% on the limiter. And as far as weight, I've figured it in as being 100 kilos heavier than the Golf, because of course they're both all-wheel drive. The Bora is naturally heavier than the Golf, so that's just the way I've done it. You don't need to do that necessarily, but that's what I've opted to do. 1560 kilos compared to 1460 on the Golf R32, and I've used that to my advantage, putting that ballast to the back to even up the distribution. And as far as the gearbox goes, it's kind of weird. You can't really get the exact ratios of the Golf on the game because the Golf has some weird settings in 4th and 5th gear. 5th gear ratio is actually higher than 4th. So what I've done is I've taken the auto setting down to 137, and then for first, I believe it's 1st, 2nd, 3rd and 4th, I think. I know for 6th as well we're running the same settings, and then we've had to change a couple. So you want 3357, 2086, 1519, 1216, 1017 and 911, and we're running the same final drive as the Golf of 4235. So that's it for the setup, and there's a couple of bits with room for variation there. As you can see, it's not rounded off PP wise, which is kind of a shame, but it's more about the fun of it. So all that remains, of course, is to take it out on the track. Now, overall, as far as performance goes, for racing, for time trials, seasonals, all that kind of stuff, it's not necessarily a great car for that, because, like with some of my other builds, that's just not the purpose. It's more about the fun factor, and kind of the novelty factor, if you will, of having the specs of the Golf in the Bora platform. So overall, if you do decide to use it, I hope you have a lot of fun with it, potentially even race it as well if you get it down to, say, 400 pp with slightly different settings. But whatever you choose to do, as I said, I hope you have a lot of fun with it, and of course there are plenty more custom and replica builds on the channel to check out. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.